The village of Ketton, found in the county of Rutland, has a remarkable history dating all the way back to the early Middle Ages, but it's also part of the wider history of the island of Britain and the Kingdom of England, which is long, rich and complex, and I will now summarise in broad strokes.
Prior to the Roman conquest, Britain was a land of tribal divisions, inhabited primarily by Celtic peoples. These tribes, though diverse, shared similar languages and religious practices. This Celtic Britain endured until the Roman Empire extended its reach to the island in 43 AD, initiating a period of Roman rule that would last nearly 4 centuries. Britain was a key part of the empire, particularly in the south and east, with roads, towns, villas and military fortifications constructed across the landscape. However, by 410 AD, the Roman legions withdrew, driven by pressures on the continent and the empire's internal collapse. In the aftermath, Britain gradually reverted to a patchwork of local cultures. In some regions, particularly in the west, a Romano-British hybrid society persisted. In others, older Celtic traditions reasserted themselves. From around 449 AD, a new era of migration and settlement began, as Germanic peoples from the continent, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes arrived, first as mercenaries, then as settlers and conquerors. Over time, they established several kingdoms across eastern and southern Britain, collectively known as the Anglo-Saxon Heptarchy. These kingdoms included Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Kent, Surrey, Sussex, Essex, Middlesex, and Wessex. Yet the Anglo-Saxon era was interrupted by another wave of external pressure. Beginning in 793 AD, with the infamous raid on Lindisfarne, Viking incursions evolved from sporadic attacks into full-scale invasions. By the mid-9th century, the great heathen army of Viking warriors sought to conquer the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms outright. By 870 AD, only Wessex remained unconquered. Under the leadership of King Alfred the Great, Wessex stood firm against Viking domination, becoming the final stronghold of English resistance. After a series of hard-fought campaigns, Alfred secured a crucial victory in 878 AD at the Battle of Edington for the last kingdom. He negotiated a division of Britain with the Viking leader Guthrum, leading to the establishment of the Danelaw in the north and east, while the English maintained control in the south. Alfred set about reorganising his realm, fortifying towns, reforming the army to ensure constant readiness, and founding a navy to counter Viking naval strength. He also laid the intellectual and administrative foundations for a unified English kingdom. His descendants would ultimately succeed in bringing together the various Anglo-Saxon realms into a single political entity, the Kingdom of England. It was during this formative medieval period that Ketton begins to emerge as a settlement. Rich in heritage and deeply rooted in the landscape of Rutland, Ketton's history stretches back to these early centuries. Originally, the area was comprised of 3 separate hamlets, Ketton, Aldgate and Geeston, which gradually coalesced into the present-day village. These core settlements were surrounded by several lesser-known hamlets, each with its own character and significance. To the north stood Wychley, located on the higher heathland. Slightly closer to Ketton was Newbottle, also to the north. To the east, perched on the lip of the spur between the Chater and the Welland valleys, lay Frogthorpe. Kelthorpe to the south still lends its name to the area. And further southwest lies Tixover, a chapelry of the Ketton Parish, which remains a remarkably intact 12th century church, one of the oldest in the region. For centuries, Ketton served as the central hub of these outlying hamlets, becoming the ecclesiastical and communal heart of the local area. By the time of the Norman conquest in the 11th century, Ketton was firmly established. The Domesday Book, compiled in 1080 AD, records Ketton as being owned by the Crown, with an estimated population of around 200 inhabitants. At this time, the settlement included a mill, likely located on the site of the current watermill off Church Street, demonstrating the village's early economic activity. The Norman conquest of England in 1066 by William of Normandy was one of the most transformative and violent upheavals in all English history. It ushered in sweeping changes to land ownership, governance, language, law, architecture, and religious life. All English tracts of land, with tiny and few exceptions, were redistributed among the Norman lords loyal to William. Ketton would be no exception. By 1156, the manor of Ketton had been granted to Richard de Humez, who was a Norman noble. Under Norman influence, the local church underwent substantial redevelopment. By 1146, Ketton had become part of the estates of the Diocese of Lincoln, one of the wealthiest and most powerful bishoprics in the realm. The church, originally built in Old English structure, was built on an ambitious scale in the Romanesque style, with a cruciform plan and a central crossing tower. Later additions in the 1240s, also under the oversight of the then Bishop of Lincoln, expanded the transepts, the aisles and the tower.
The striking 14th century brooch spire remains a defining part of Ketton's landscape.
As was common in medieval England, the village was structured around its parish church, which formed the spiritual and social nucleus of the community. Of particular significance was the Priory, a residence and farmstead immediately south of the church, administered by the prior. Today, the site is occupied by a later building that still bears the name the Priory. Unlike many English villages, which typically grew around a single manor, Ketton developed a more complex system of manorial estates. In addition to Perpendle Manor, later replaced by the current Ketton Hall, there are several others: Greenham's Manor, Gray's or Whitewell's Manor, Hutchins Manor and Kelthorpe Manor. The site of Kelthorpe Manor to the south still preserves remnants of medieval fish ponds, a common feature of high-status medieval estates. Some of Ketton's oldest domestic medieval buildings still stand today. Opposite the entrance to the village school on the High Street is a row of cottages containing medieval architectural features. These include external buttresses, a blocked carriage arch, and several Gothic arched interior doorways. It is speculated that this structure may have served as a gatehouse for one of the medieval manors, possibly the Perpendle Manor, which was described in 1650 as having a gatehouse. The medieval period also saw the rise of Ketton's limestone industry. Although the earliest parts of St Mary's Church were constructed from Barnack stone, a sign that local quarrying was not yet fully developed, royal grants for stone extraction begin appearing from the late 13th century onwards. By then, the stone pits north of the village were being systematically worked. Ketton stone would go on to become one of the most prized building materials in the land, used in structures both local and far afield. Traces of medieval agriculture also remain visible today. The distinctive patterns of strip farming, open field systems that dominated the rural landscape for centuries can still be discerned in the pasture fields around Aldgate, accessible via public footpaths. Among Ketton's most notable medieval figures is Robert of Ketton. A scholar, diplomat, and translator, he spent much of his life in Iberia and was among the first Europeans to seriously engage with Arabic science and philosophy. Some centuries later,
Thomas Burroughs, who was born in 1834, became a distinguished figure both in the village of Ketton and the wider county of Rutland.
In 1904, he was appointed High Sheriff of Rutland, a role steeped in local tradition and civic responsibility. Educated at Harrow and later at Trinity College, Cambridge, Burroughs was a man of considerable public spirit. His professional life was dedicated to land management and surveying, and he played a vital role in the stewardship of local estates. More than a man of simple administration, however, he was deeply involved in the spiritual and architectural life of the village, serving as church warden at St Mary's Church in Ketton. His influence was particularly notable during the church's restoration between 1861 and 1863, where he was a leading man in ensuring that the building's medieval character was sensitively preserved while being sympathetically modernised.
Thomas Burroughs was a keen horticulturalist. He did much to improve the countryside around the village. In particular, he created this parkland here, which straddles both sides of Church Road, and it stretches from the River Chater all the way to the old railway station.
Within this landscape, he planted a variety of remarkable and unusual trees, some of which still stand today as a living testament to his vision and passion for the natural world. The Burroughs family also enriched the church's aesthetic and spiritual interior. They were responsible for the stained glass windows that grace the east end of the chancel and the eastern end of the south wall, bathing the church in coloured light. Furthermore, the family funded the installation of a new altar, solidifying their long-standing legacy in the religious and communal heart of Ketton. The family had settled in the village during the 1850s, and their impact remains. As someone who grew up with a profound sense of curiosity about history, I find Ketton's natural landscape and architectural heritage a continual source of inspiration. It's through this village that my love of the past was ignited. While it may be one of many English villages scattered across the countryside, Ketton possesses something truly special. It encapsulates the spirit of England in a way that is increasingly rare. A quiet harmony between the ancient, the medieval, and the living is present. The enduring medieval fabric of the village, its church, its winding lanes, and its layered fields all speak of a lived and inherited past. For me, Ketton invokes a sense of the mythical. While J.R.R. Tolkien famously cited Warwickshire as his inspiration for the Shire, I would suggest that Ketton and Rutland as a whole could lay an equal claim. There is something gently fantastical about the place. Its hobbit-like charm, its winding byways, its soft hills, and patchwork of green fields all conjure up an almost story-like sense of Britain. It is a place where the spirit of medieval rural England lingers still, not just in ruins and relics alone, but in the very soil and stone. The trees seem to whisper of centuries past. The old walls and weathered rooftops wear their age with quiet dignity. Time in Ketton moves at a gentler pace, and the modern world seems to hesitate at its boundaries, reluctant to disturb its peace.